Well, we're going to call the work session or special meeting of the Board of Education to order. And I guess the first order of business is to appoint a clerk since Tom Holland is sick. And
Okay.
all right,
I recuse myself for that.
all right, that's fine. Lynn, you volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
All right, good. Rather than thrusting it involuntarily on anyone, I'll take your offer and appoint Lynn Robson clerk for this meeting. And I will now entertain a motion to suspend Robert's rules.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Sandy, second by Brian. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion passes. And I guess next up is going to be the St. Croix Meadows proposal and discussion. And so from here, it's a little more free form since we're suspending Robert's rules. We don't have to recognize individual speakers, but is this, you want Tim to kick off this discussion? Because as you recall, we were all there at the City of Hudson, meeting with the City of Hudson, the joint meeting, and there were questions asked, issues raised, and certainly information was going to be exchanged between the city, the seller's representative, who will have information regarding potential development of the side of the drawing that was on the left, if you will, the potentially developable land, and then provide the city with information from the school's perspective as to how this might go forward. So I guess first on here, Tim, you're showing us a concept drawing. It looks with the wetland delineation. Is that what that red is?
Yeah, we did, yeah. So I'm going to start. Mark Wolke from Hopkins and also joining in this discussion a little bit. But we had this point. We've got some wetland mapping of the St. Croix Meadows site, and what that's revealed. We don't have an official report yet. That's coming, but it was important to get the mapping area. So what that's revealing is that this red area here has been determined as wetland. This area up here in blue also is. And so what we did was we went back and said, because we've got this area out here that we thought could potentially be wetlands, now we know they are. So what could we do to try and rework the site design? So you're going to see the design is a little bit different from what we had before. And so parking has been changed a little bit from that. One of the things we did wind up losing is the competition baseball field. So we had to take that out. And then we still have the 12 tennis courts and practice fields. Everything else is pretty much the same. Mark may have any comment, walk through a little bit.
Right now, you want me to? Sure. Sure, just on the layout. Yeah, that is a delineated wetland, so we have to respect that at this point in our planning. So that's what we try to do in this concept. And again, I'll preface this by saying this is a capacity analysis more than a design. So I don't want to start talking about the field's orientation and exact locations, because this is just really to understand what can fit on the site more so than is it the best design.
I have a question.
Yes.
No one has contacted the DNR or any wetland authority about this, right?
We've had a wetland specialist, an assured, it's called an assured delineator. They're on the DNR's list. There's 9 wetland
Okay,
delineators in the state.
are they who came up with this?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
They delineated it per the state statutes for wetlands.
All right, thank you.
Is that something that can be further kind of further
Mitigated?
like mitigated, or
Well, here's my answer or lack thereof on that. My experience with wetlands is every district we've been working in can be a little bit different. It can vary depending on the region and the DNR person that you're working with. There are avenues to mitigate where you can fill certain areas and then you either pay into a wetland bank, which it's I think the price we heard was $40,000 to $50,000 an acre.
For somewhere around 40 to 60,000 an acre.
Per acre you would pay into a bank, and then the DNR has banks of wetlands that they use that, I think they use that money to improve the wetlands or create more wetlands in certain areas. So you can do that, or you can mitigate by creating your own wetland somewhere. I don't know exactly what that means, or whether it has to be within a certain distance of this site or anything. I'm not certain of that. And some of these answers, it'll be difficult for me to answer them. You know, the wetland specialist or the DNR would have to answer some of these, but.
All right, thanks.
But it's a, typically you won't get an answer, and this is typically from DNR, a specific answer until you submit a specific request. In other words, here's what we want to do, here's what we'd like to do. And they base everything typically on a alternatives analysis, they call it. So is there a viable alternative? In this case, I would say, since you don't even own the land yet, they could look at it and say, well, there are viable alternatives. This isn't defined as a taxable parcel yet, so, or as a separate property or parcel, so you could use more land here to do some of the things you need to do. Or you could, if you don't own a site yet, they could say, have you looked at other sites? And they would want to know the sites you've looked at and why those aren't viable alternatives. So,
It requires going into a much deeper process
yes.
to find out.
That's
which
good,
are-
that's all I need to know. All right, thanks.
Okay. As far as the layout here, I guess a couple of things I'd point out. If we did have to respect what's here as a delineated wetland, obviously it eats up some of the property. I think the number of usable acres dedicated towards school use dropped here 4 acres on this concept versus the last concept. So that dropped 4 acres. It did take up some of the land that was shown as taxable development property. That's shown as 30 acres on this. So there's about a 7-acre difference because of that. And then the other thing is, if it did have to remain, obviously you have this barrier to work around. So this isn't a design, but you'd still have to have something down here that would be fairly isolated from the rest of the site by that wetland. You'd have to go around it. So I think those are some of the major differences. And then, as Tim mentioned, we did lose one field. And from the original program that we looked at, that we felt was pretty typical for large high schools that we see being developed, we lost one practice field from the original concept that we did for
The
site plan.
130 acre concept, the
Yeah.
full site concept.
Yeah. That was part of the original, I guess, programming that we had talked about. And then, so there's one, and then the conservation baseball field that Tim mentioned. Yes.
Where's the second ingress and egress?
This would be emergency access, so that would be it. I don't know.
But at the city council, when we met with the city council, the first thing out of Mayor Burchell's mouth was that road isn't gonna work.
This road
That
is
road
gonna-
right there is not going to work.
Yeah.
So I would have expected to see another, since you're presenting us with a different plan, I would have expected to see that fixed.
So Tim can answer that.
You've got another access that isn't being used right now in here. So there is another access into the property. But I think until we will
Well,
know
but what
more
he was
about the
saying is
development.
that isn't gonna let you stub that road like that.
Well, I think that's all subject to more discussion if it goes into that, but there is another access over there. So the developer would probably may have a road access going in as well, but that has to be worked out yet with whoever's going to develop it.
Okay?
I think you'd have to do a traffic study and find out if, I mean, to serve the entire development, this probably wouldn't be adequate to serve just the school, and then if there were another access here to serve most of this, You'd have to do a traffic analysis to take a look at that. We've done other, I think Kimberly High School's a fairly large high school, it's only one entrance. And this actually has better off-site road situation than that. As long as we have I know for emergencies, you absolutely need a second. But as far as the rest of it, we'd have to look at, we'd probably have to do a traffic study at some point.
Just asking.
I think it was purposely, though, left this way because we were just looking at our portion that we were interested in, as opposed to the taxable development portion. And that's where the developer would be basing that design and where the roads come in based on whatever the use is and how that lays out.
And we still have no developer interested in the rest of it? Anybody know?
What's that now, Sam?
Any developers come out that's interested in the rest of it?
I have no idea.
Not with us, right, anyway, right? Nothing, Janie?
Well, the
Nobody
pro-
contacts me, no.
The property is listed, and so.
Oh, it's listed, who's it listed with?
With Greystone, and so the property's listed. Greystone, Ryan Zeller has met with the mayor and the development director, and so they've talked about uses for the property. And Brian Zeller feels that commercial or maybe light industrial is certainly feasible. He feels that residential could possibly also be feasible. He's had one meeting at this point, but he called it a productive meeting. He thought it was a good meeting, but there's, it's really in the beginning stages of discussion.
Wouldn't a study need to be done on the roadway anyway with, if we go look at Red Brick?
As you move forward, the city would require a formal traffic study, a traffic impact. That would be the next step as you get further down the road.
So I have another question, and I didn't know that Greystone and Zeller had this listed. But because he's got the whole thing listed?
He has listed the 30 acres, or 33, it was 33, now it's down to 30 in this drawing.
Okay. Would there not be some kind of a conflict of interest with Lynn? The fact that her husband is a business partner of Zeller's?
No, I don't believe so. In fact, this is the owner. I mean, we don't own the property. The owner can list that's the owner's choice to list with whomever they want to list with. That's not something that we would have any control over, and there's no benefit, no one's benefiting from that.
Okay.
Sandy, I did ask Mick to take a look at it, and he rendered an opinion. So-
And there's no
conflict
or code of ethics violation.
I know, but Mick always thinks there's no conflict or code of ethics violation, so that's fine. I'm just thinking of the public perception of this, more than whether or not Mick thinks there's a conflict or a code of ethics violation. I just thought I'd ask.
What do you think we need to check with to see if there's a conflict? Who would be better?
Well, an attorney probably was not hired by the board. Well, Mick is
But
your
if I
guy,
hire
so
somebody separately, that opinion won't hold up as
Yeah, that's fine.
defensible.
I'm fine with it. I'm just
I just-
asking the question.
I get it.
Except,
So a violation would mean if the board member would gain or her family member would gain financially from this property,
Mhm.
and that's not the case.
and plus, I don't know how much control the school district would have, or this board would have over who somebody else hires as their representative.
This is what I see as the problem, okay? Brian Zeller has that listed. That listing going forward probably is contingent upon the school district buying the rest of the land. If he's only got 30 acres listed for the purposes of commercial, and the school district doesn't buy the rest, then his commercial buyer goes away. So his interest in that 30 acres has to do with the school district purchasing the rest of it. Because Brian Zeller and her husband are
Well,
business
how do
partners.
we know that? How do we know that it is contingent on that? How do we not know
It's a-
what
Well,
they're...
do you think the
It's a fair
seller,
point, very-
do you think that the seller's gonna sell 30 acres of his parcel for commercial and let the rest of it sit there if the school district doesn't go forward?
Yeah, but I'm saying, how do we, I don't know what the terms of that representation is. and what the contingencies are. But it's possible that that's
Okay.
one of the contingencies. I'm not saying that's not possible.
Okay, so Brian Zeller and his partner David Robson have a very big vested interest in making sure the school district builds a school there. The district builds a school there, because that makes their 30 acres very much more saleable. Now, when that property sells, David Robson is going to probably benefit from
No, he
that. He might have the buyer. He doesn't have the listing, but he could have the buyer, which means she would benefit because she's married to
Well,
him.
except
So
when that comes, at that point, that would be then where she would be recused. If Dave Robson brings the buyer to this transaction, then that would be a time when it would be a potential conflict.
her involvement in making this decision is going to affect the saleability of that 30 acres. So, now you've already got an opinion that says it's not a conflict, and I'm going to accept that, but I believe it is a conflict, and I believe the public perception of this is going to be it's a conflict. But we can move on. I just wanted to voice my opinion about it.
Well,
I certainly
Oh.
don't want to have my vote as a board member on this site to be clouded by, I mean, even though I've had a legal opinion, if this board feels that that could cloud the public's opinion, I would prefer to recuse myself. So I think you should discuss that.
okay, and that's fine, but we're not here to take any vote tonight
No.
or any action. We're just here to have a discussion. And I'd like to talk about, what the latest development with this wetland delineation and what it may mean going forward, because we may never even get to that part. where-
You're absolutely right. I just wanted it on record that I'm voicing my objection to this, and I want you all to know why I think it's a conflict.
Yeah. But I do recognize that having the school on this property probably does make the land more valuable and make it more likely that it's going to be developed. I think that was kind of what our assumption was, but I'm not a developer, so I can't guarantee that. I don't know if the city council is taking that same position or not.
And that's exactly right, Jamie. You just said exactly what I'm saying. Having the school district on that land makes that more likely to be developed, which means that she and her husband, and because he owns part of that company, Greystone, that
David doesn't.
they are going to potentially benefit from the school district being there. So,
Well-
and that's okay. We can move on. I just
Right.
wanted to voice.
I think that there's
my
other,
objection.
lots of facts about that could be addressed at a later time.
Right. I just wanted to
Whether
voice my
those are
objection.
true or not, I don't think we want to take this time now to be talking about it.
So I just wanted to clarify, though, our attorney, the board's attorney, has looked into all of those pieces and rendered an opinion about that.
I know.
And that one has no conflict.
I got it.
All right, so now, with regard to this proposal, and I know this is again another concept that has to take into account the wetland. The original concept didn't have the wetland going in as far. Now that it does, it takes out one ball field. I think you said it was the
Right.
competition baseball field that we lose. But the one issue I have with this is that this took 4 acres off the school's portion of it and 3 acres off the development. And our initial proposal was that we told the city there would be 33 acres. And, again, we don't have the information from the developer yet, whether that's sufficient amount of acres and to generate sufficient tax dollars for this to be something that the city would be interested in. But I think reducing it from 33 to 30 probably makes it less likely. So if we were to keep it at 33, I'm presuming that means that the school's portion would have to be reduced to 56, correct?
Yeah, I mean, round numbers, yeah.
And then that would mean we would lose something. What would we more likely lose if we were to go down to 56?
Well, you really can't, you have to have a building area, and you have to have parking, so I think, you'd be getting, most likely, you remove fields.
Right, but which fields? I mean, we're talking about here on this concept, I know that you can move things around, but it looks like just where that wetlands is, it's gonna be tough to put that football and track complex or stadium anywhere else but where it is.
It would be very challenging, and being where it is, then it would be hard to, again, without getting into, because it's not a design, but just because of where things are, because it all stems from where the existing building is. And so the building zone has to work around that. And then the track, with this here, I mean, the track really wouldn't fit anywhere down in this zone, so you almost have to keep it there. So it'd be a challenge to how to figure out how to get 3 more acres into that 30 acres. It might be difficult. I mean, you certainly can do it.
So
Is the 30 acres all of the yellow, or is it just the yellow up to the dashed line?
It's just to here. And maybe we should have put a different color on here. Maybe we'll.
But isn't any of that, I mean, is there setback requirements around there, or why aren't we talking about using some of that?
This?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, this is residential. The other thing with the wetland, there'll be an established setback around here that you can't put a structure in. You may be able to do some grading in there, but it could be 25 feet, it could be 50 feet, it could be up to, unlikely it would be much higher than 50 feet. But that's gonna put a big area all around here. This area is totally isolated because of what's delineated as wetland. And with setbacks here for property lines and setback here, you know, there might be an acre or 2 right there at most. And that's where that 3 acres was before. This came down and was included in as part of the 33 in the previous concept.
There was also discussion of the city that they didn't think that just one road in.
Yeah,
would
we
be-
talked
we
about
already
that before you
covered
got here.
Okay.
the other thing I'd like to point out about the fields, because there's 2 ways to look at the fields. Looking at them as FIAD spaces and also looking at them as competition. So as we look at it right now, we have 2 practice fields that would be used for FIAD. Tennis courts are used for FIAD. And the 2 probably softball and baseball practice fields would be used for FIAD. So just some more information.
Do you know if you can, students can't walk through that wetland area either then, can they?
Well,
I mean, you can't have walking paths to get back and forth between those 2 areas?
if you're not going to disturb, I think you could have a walking path through there, but it's probably going to be wet in there quite a bit. Small footprint.
And they wouldn't let you build a bridge over it?
You probably could. but it would
You
get-
build a tennis court over it?
Tennis court over it? Probably not. I wouldn't think so without extreme cost to do something like that. But that's not to say you couldn't have a pathway through there or something like that, but, you know, the time of year when school is too, I mean, you've got winter and then you have spring.
Oh, yeah.
In the winter, you could probably walk through there, no problem, but you wouldn't be going there to use any of the fields south of there.
Could you build parking above it, like a deck? I mean, I've
don't
done a
think so.
project where we mitigated the floodplain underneath the parking structure.
Yeah, I don't think so, because the wetland, you can't have any structures in. You can't fill or cut.
I'm not talking about
And-
putting any structures, I'm talking about putting a structure over it.
Yeah, but
Where
I
it
think,
would
I'm
still
saying
flow
the
freely
span,
underneath
I
it.
don't know if the span, I mean, I guess I can't answer that specifically, but the problem, even in the setback, there's restriction from structures in the setback. There's not supposed to be.
Yeah, you couldn't even
So
put
by the
any
time you
support
got it
structures.
spanned, it would be an incredible span, I would think. It would be an incredible cost.
At what point do we walk from this location?
I'm not
'Cause
thrilled with
I'm-
losing a field down there, to be honest with you, I mean.
I'm just ready to walk away from the entire location. I mean, this is such a political hot potato that we're just wasting our time, I feel, talking about this. I'm
I
ready
got
to
enough
go.
info, I don't know if we can keep talking through this, so. For this particular topic on the wetlands, I'm good, so.
I agree with you, Bruce. But they had did anybody watch the meeting of the city council?
Mhm.
You watched it? Everybody? Did everybody watch it?
Not the meeting they had with us, but the meeting.
The meeting they
apart.
had that
Separate
last
one.
Monday night, yeah.
It's a separate kind of topical conversation, I think, right?
Yeah, you know, I watched the whole thing, that portion of it, and I really came away feeling that we could do all of this and end up still with nothing. Spend a lot more time and money and still have 0 at the end.
Well, this is why, you know, the mayor and I held the first meeting, was to see if there was gauged interest. If it had been stated emphatically at that meeting that it didn't matter whether it was 33 acres or 50 acres that was being developed, that it would have had 3 people strongly against it, then I think there would have been something where we wouldn't have been opposing, talking about it further, or attempting to get more information. When we left that meeting, it seemed like there was at least support for getting more information and pursuing it, as far as it was worth pursuing as a plan. I think this information, starts adding doubt to that. And at some point, we do, as a board, need to make a decision. What are we willing, because this was our initial proposal to the city. And we still have to get more information, come back from the city. But at some
Coming
point, we're
from
gonna
them
have
or
the
going
what-if
to it?
game. What if the city is talking to the developer, and based on the dollars being generated, the type of development on that left side of the line, so to speak, if what's there now is not enough, but maybe 40 would be enough, or 45, and we're down to 91 acres of usable area now. What, we had set our goal as at 65 acre and had even compromised that, just going with our initial proposal. Now we're down to 59. What's the, I think to follow up on Bruce's point, at what point are we saying, let's not spin our wheels if it's not going to generate the type of size that we need in order to have adequate practice area, gym space, and expansion in the future? That's the question. Anyone?
I agree with Bruce. It seemed like it was a pretty clear indication from the council that they weren't willing to look at this further, that the 33 acres didn't seem to be enough. And if it came down to a tie, that it seemed like Mayor Burchell was clearly against it.
Well, yeah, and I don't know, well, first of all, the mayor doesn't vote, and that was part of the correction in this week's paper. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, but
Unless he breaks the tie.
there is no breaking of the tie. That's the thing, is it's got to have 4 council votes, because it's got to be considered a supermajority. What's that?
I thought he broke the
breaks
tie too. I didn't know that.
Well, 4-2 is not a tie. If it's 3-3, then it doesn't go forward. It fails.
Oh,
This
I
is
see.
to modify their comprehensive plan.
Yeah, to modify the comprehensive
Oh,
plan,
takes
it
more
can't
than
be just a
majority.
simple
I see.
majority.
Supermajority, okay.
Right. Yeah, he votes when a majority is needed, but
Oh, I
in this
see.
case, it's.
So he would have to vote in order to modify the comprehensive plan.
He would not vote in modifying the comprehensive plan because
It would
you
need-
need a 4-2 vote
Okay.
to modify the comprehensive plan.
But I thought 3 or 4 councilmen had pretty clearly said
4.
that they were against it.
Well,
The
against
original
what?
plan.
That's the whole
The
point.
original
is that-
plan with 33 acres of.
Sure, that was the original plan. That's why I'm asking the question, because what we're anticipating is this was to be a discussion, an exchange of ideas. Of, can we make this work? What will it take to make it work for the city? If the answer to that is 50 acres needs to be retained as development, then what's our response to that? That's what we need to be able to, if we're saying that's not in the cards, then let's indicate that. But at 33, there is some inkling here, but we still don't have the information. It was very clear that the sub-headline, I don't know if that accurately portrayed what the vote was about. The vote was whether or not the city council meets with us live in a special meeting until there's further information, and that was clearly they didn't want to do that until there's further information, because that further information, as it's coming in, may put this whole thing in doubt and would render moot any meeting that we have.
I thought that the vote was that they weren't going to meet with us in another joint meeting at all. They just want us to bring them
Their
information.
proposal. That's
That-
what I understood Mary's motion to be as well.
That's what I thought she said as well, but my understanding is that it's been written down at city council as being until further information. So, so how that got added, I guess.
That's
during
not
the
what she
That's
said.
not what she said.
It's not
I
what she
watched
said.
it, that's not what she
But
said.
regardless, we don't have to meet in person to come to this decision. I mean, we can still exchange information, we don't have to do it in person. And so the question is, as we get this information and the city council, how they perceive what we're coming forward with, they don't meet again until, I guess, July 7th is their next meeting. We still have, and we're putting together, this is just the first piece. Tim has other information regarding this, but do we want to continue to go for it if if you want to use that phrase. Might be copyrighted, but do we still want to go for it if it's going to mean that we're going to be down into the mid-50s or low 50s, or even not even 50 acres left for our school use?
And I can't answer that without knowing if there's other options that have come up with respect to land, what our other alternatives are. I mean, to answer that question, I need to know what else we would have to consider.
Well,
To be honest with you.
that brings up, go ahead. I got a email, did you get an email from somebody asking about the government land?
I did.
Okay. He sent me a copy of it too. I don't know if he sent it to anybody else, but I got a copy of it. And he asked why, if we're down below 63 acres or 65, which was 65 the original plan, that you had to have 65?
Yes. Yep,
So
65
he-
usable, Sandy.
Right, 65 usable, yeah.
After the article that was in the paper, he emailed you and me, and I thought he emailed everybody, but maybe not, about if we were down to 59 or 60 or 61 acres, why wouldn't we consider the government land, because that was 63. So I don't, have you responded to him yet?
Yes, I have.
There was wetlands there and stuff too. I mean, the usable acreage
Right.
there was like
Lift station,
45 or
there's
44 or
a
something.
number of
Okay,
things.
and you told them
so,
all that.
yes,
Okay.
and it comes down to a little over 50 estimated
Low
usable.
50s usable, yeah.
So,
So,
so we're talking 51 or 52, just to be clear, it's low 50s, right? Somewhere. So,
But I think, one other comment, I think the 65 acres was established, wasn't it, when we were gonna put a 4-year high school on property? And then when we lowered it to the 3-year, I think we redid that 65.
Well, we can look at
Acre figure.
a 3-year high school and looking at the fields around it. And we can think back to the 63 acres, very tight site with those fields. We've eliminated one practice field to get down to 63. So if you have a smaller site, you're gonna eliminate more that's usable.
Can you go up instead of out?
Sorry. can you
A
speak
building,
up?
up, instead of a big sprawling building, can you go up? Like-
Certainly, this building is a multi-story building
Okay.
as well. So it's how many floors you can go up and still have the efficiency of students moving from one place to another and safely.
is that orange
Right,
actually the
that's-
building right now? Is that the existing building, the orange one?
No, that's the building zone. So-
How big is the actual building?
Mark, do you?
Jody, I'm gonna let
The
you.
existing building?
Yeah.
The
Like what,
existing-
Isn't it like?
The existing building really only goes the length of that right there, yeah. It sits right
Sorry,
there.
shouldn't have touched it.
It's a whiteboard.
Forgot it's a whiteboard.
So,
The orange is actually showing the building zone with all the space for the rest that you need to add on to the.
When you say rest of space, built to the 1650 capacity.
so orange would be the size of the school?
No.
There's setbacks from that, you can have sidewalks and things around it, you're going
But
to have.
basically the size of the school?
And we wanted to plan for at least a little bit of expansion ability onto the building if needed.
Okay.
Well, is there any other comments about at least this concept, and then we want to talk about preparing the other information?
So we're down to 59 acres at this point. Mitigation could be possible. It's a long road, it sounds like, and we're not sure what it would be like at the other end of that road. And I guess, the real question is this workable for the board or not? Because if the city council would be okay with 30, and if they went in more, and this isn't workable, then the whole plan doesn't work.
And I'm very, very sorry for my ignorance, so I apologize if I'm asking something redundant. You've got 2 acres for the public street, right? I presume that's from Carmichael all the way down to the turnaround? Okay. So, assuming that the city would say that you need to have at least another street that goes across there, is that another acre that's bond? So now are we at 29?
Roughly.
And did you guys already establish that? I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, is
Well-
30 really 30 or is it 29?
Can I maybe take a shot at this whole conversation? And then
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Robert's rules are not in. Everyone gets a say here.
We get to say it, right?
So, yeah, I just think, the kind of I think the big ticket is, there seem to be the perception is, after our meeting, is that clearly the motive, it wasn't like, hey, we're excited about it, or there's an opportunity. It was really, it didn't seem right, for the city council. And we talked about making this a win-win, and clearly, at least from that follow-on meeting, without even having any additional information, the tone was not really excited at all. And I'm kind of paraphrasing and summarizing. So, given that, I'm not sure, and now that the amount of square footage is acres is going down, I think it's to me it's a non-starter. I think we should I think personally we should just move on,
I agree.
say we made it, we worked with the city, and it's good. I mean, that's exactly what we want to do, is gauge where the city was at and make sure this was a good opportunity for both of us. And the city doesn't feel like it's a good opportunity right now, so I think we got kind of information we needed. And I'm glad that the city let us know where things are at, and I think we should move on. So I think we should just stop talking about it, because I think it's basically off the table, from my standpoint.
Check.
I agree. I've always thought it was, I always spent, 2 years before the last referendum, and I've been on the board 2 years, we spent two more years talking about this. How long can you talk about something? So that's long enough.
It's an important decision.
4 years is enough time to know that it's just
Yeah.
not the right site for what you
So-
want to do.
I don't want to be presumptive, Jamie, but I'm just thinking that, that was my kind of perception of the situation. So, which I'm glad we got the, I'm actually glad we went back to the city one more time, just to make sure that there wasn't another alternative that we didn't think about before.
I agree, I think this is the right thing to do.
Well, we have an agenda here. We can actually skip over then preparing the information, because you had other information for the city council.
We were just gonna review what we were getting ready. Not a lot of information there, but.
Well, I suppose if there's a motion,
I was just going to
Oh,
ask you, this is a work session, we can't do a motion, can we?
No, we would take it to the next board meeting.
that's where it would have to be active.
And you would give us guidance that that's what you would like on the agenda.
I think, yes.
Well, we'll put it on the agenda. I think that we still then exchange the information that we've at least
Yeah, sure.
received so far.
It'd be good information for the city to know regardless, probably, about this wetland delineation. It'd be useful for them.
Right.
So probably this is the most important information. The rest really relates to moving forward in a different
Yeah.
way.
I think they have a little better idea of wetland
Is that
delineation.
through Jamie then? Jamie would contact the mayor and have that discussion and update him, or how would that funnel?
Yeah.
I would like to see that.
I'll contact the mayor and find out how they want to. I mean, right now, the stuff that was happening on the left side of the property is being communicated by the seller's developer, and it was either Tim's job or I guess my job to communicate it to the city, so I'm willing to do that.
And we
And just to kind of modify what I said, if for some reason there's a complete change of heart of the city between now and the next board meeting, I'd be willing to have a different thought on it. But given where things are at, I think the next logical step is just to say thank you and move on.
I mean, I hear where you're coming from, and I want to get moving on this.
Yeah.
I don't want to spin our wheels either.
Yeah.
What I have a problem with this concept drawing is the fact that it shows 30 acres for development use. To me, we showed a concept to the city of 33, and I think if we show anything less than 33, to me, that's not.
That's exactly my point, is let's move
That's
on.
not right.
Yeah,
So
and
then,
the other part about
that
that-
means we're at 56 at best.
Yeah.
And then you start taking it from there if
That's
there's more
exactly what I'm
roads
saying,
and
is I don't
stuff.
want to lose any more, this isn't even
I don't
acceptable.
even,
to me.
yeah, I'm not even thrilled about
Right.
compromising the way that we did. I don't mean compromising with the city,
So
I mean
I think we
compromising
agree
our
with each
site
other,
to
right?
take things
Right.
out.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
The bottom line here is 56 acres, too little
Yeah.
for us to.
This doesn't work for me, this amount of acreage doesn't even work for me.
So we can, Jamie, we can send the map to the mayor So he has that information when you have that conversation as well.
That's fine.
And then we'll put this on the board agenda for a decision.
Okay, so then we move on now for other considerations and advancement of our secondary space solution.
So we have identified each of the components of the option that the board is considering. And so you can talk about any of those. We've asked Hoffman representatives, Jody, are you going to do the 8-9? Jody Andrews? So the design of the 8-9 is the next thing that we're going to talk about.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I am.
Don't think, Jody?
I don't know yet. No, I'm saving, I'm saving, I'm gonna go for seconds. Okay.
We like killing trees. Just kidding.
Please don't, yes, and we know you're very committed to those trees.
We are very committed. Well, like the series kind of As I'm trying to separate these pages here, just as a little bit of a background, I know everyone's been keeping up to date on the process and the progress. It's okay, I'm just gonna sit right here with you
I wonder
guys.
if I can get a permanent laser tag facility for the senior
I
party.
bet I can.
So, what we've been doing kind of in the interim here is Catherine and I came over here and we sat down with all the middle school staff, representatives of the middle school staff and administration. We sat down with all the high school staff and representatives and administration. We sat down with district staff and kind of went through a programming exercise. And what that really did is that instead of using some of the numbers that we used as estimates before in terms of how big the building is, we actually went through and came up with a full program. In terms of all the spaces that are going to go in here. We identified each space, the quantity of them, how big they are, and started to put that into the options that we're going to talk about tonight. So one of the tasks that we had was to take a look at your existing high school and see how well that would fit into the existing building. So the diagram that you have in front of you tonight, and feel free to jump in at any time with questions if you like. Really, the colors only mean what the area is used for. So, obviously the first one there, that kind of taupey brown color, that's administration. That's specifically talking about high school, or in this case, 8-9 school administration space. The other one that you probably want to make note of is the kind of pinkish area is the district administration, and that's going to be in the upper left-hand corner. You can see the space for that. So the legends in the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of make out what the spaces are going to be used for accordingly. Now again, this is kind of more of a use diagram. It's not a design, it's not a floor plan, it's an overlay on what you have there. So the goal here really was to fit the spaces in the best that we could, and try and figure out what spaces we would need to alter, to what degree we would need to alter those. So you're not going to see individual offices laid out in the administration area for the district administration. You're not going to see some of those things on here, but you will see an accounting of the area. And again, that references directly back to that program that we created. So the amount of area that you see here, that's a pretty solid estimate on what we're gonna
Before you
do.
go, I have a question. Where did you say the administration offices are going to be?
The district administrations are this kind of mauve color. In
Oh, the
upper-
labels in there are what they currently are used
That's
for?
right. That's what I was just talking about, Sandy.
Okay, the only reason I'm asking is
Yep.
because the color here under the word administration doesn't look mauve. It
Well,
looks like it's yellow.
district
or something.
administration is right over here.
Oh,
on the second
okay, so
column.
administration then is for the
That's-
high school,
That's
or
for
the
the
school
9,
administration.
or 8-9, sorry.
All right, got it.
Dyslexical, 9, 8, 8, 9.
No, that's okay, I just want it really, really clear in my head.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on
Absolutely.
here.
And thank you for jumping in, answering, or asking those questions. So, again, just to reiterate, whatever. That space is it's an allocation of the total space. So, like I was saying, in the district administration area, you won't see all the individual offices or conference rooms or stores or anything like that laid out yet. But you look at all that same color space, that's an allocation of the space that we're basing off the program. Okay, everyone clear on that?
Mhm.
All right.
One quick question, does this include the relocation of IT?
I do,
Which is next
yes.
door?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And there's a considerable amount of space. You see the remodel for the ASC is roughly 13,800 square feet. And then in the upper right-hand corner, as long as we're talking about that, that's the current auto shop. An 8-9 really doesn't have a big use for an auto shop. So the thought is that would be used for district storage and vehicle parking. Maybe Jim's office would be in there also, so we're allocating some space in there for that.
Okay.
So those spaces kind of get separated in this option. But just as backing up to kind of an overall concept, the direction that we kind of took on this was trying to fit as many, obviously, spaces into their existing uses as we can. So for instance, we're not reusing the gym for anything else. That's going to remain a gym. The locker rooms are going to be in locker rooms. All the fine arts in the auditorium are all going to remain as those spaces. And then the indications of where we're going to be actually remodeling are that kind of heavy dashed line, and then they're also labeled with the big text on there. So you see, for instance, on the east side of the building there, remodeling for classrooms about 7,653 square feet. Remodeling for art, that's kind of pointing to this upper floor area there in the pinkish color, 1,400 square feet for that. Remodeling classrooms on the upper floor, about 4,734 square feet. Remodel for Strive. These are kind of spaces that we said, okay, we're going to start to address some of those classroom issues that you have there with the smaller classrooms, and make it more like the environment that they're in right now at the middle school. And those rooms are a little bit bigger, a little bit more flexible in terms of use. And the structure in that area actually allows us to do that. The precast structure on the second floor at least spans a considerable distance, so there's some flexibility on where we want to put walls and those kind of things. Down below, not so much. They shortened up the depth of the floor structure, and so the spans are a little bit more. So you got columns and things that might be in the way of where some of the walls go. But we accounted for that in terms of how we laid out the space. So on the east side, we're really starting to address some of those issues that, like I said, that are existing there. As we move kind of from right to left across the plan, administration for the 8-9 would be plugged into where high school administration is right now. There really would be no change in that. We talked about the auditorium, the kitchen. That would stay in this option. That would stay the district kitchen. So there's really no modifications to that. And Sam will get to it in a little bit. And we're just talking about space now. And this isn't talking about some of the other issues that you may want to consider addressing in terms of the condition of some of these spaces. That really reflects in the budget. So as far as the allocation, the commons really remains the same. The kitchen stays in the same place. Library stays in the same place. We talked about the upper left-hand corner there, including part of the stage. That would be reallocated for, actually all of the stage would be reallocated for district administration. As we move over into the western part of the building, that one, the classrooms are a little bit more appropriate for the 8-9 levels. So the majority of those are staying as is. But what we are doing is, as it's noted there, we're remodeling some space for face, and it's not actually labeled, but also there's some additional remodeling on the west side there for science and some of the other classrooms on that side.
Space, family and consumer science.
I'm sorry, family and consumer science. We always talk in acronyms. I sometimes forget that not everyone remembers those acronyms, so thank you, Ray. So again, plugging most of the classrooms in as they are on the left side. Now, when we met with the middle school staff, obviously I think they might have wanted to be a little bit more aggressive on what we do over here. We tried to balance that with the existing conditions as best we could. One of those balancing items is really that all of the science for both 8th and 9th is located where the science is right now on the left side. There's really no accommodations for science on the east side of this. That's one of those things where we said, are we going to just tear those out and recreate them on the other side, or are we going to try and use them where they are? That's that's the direction that we took on this. So using those to the best of their purpose and repurposing those for the, or reusing those for the 8th and 9th grade level. That's kind of it in a nutshell. There's no additions on this, there's no demolition as part of this other than the interior demolition. We're just kind of plugging these spaces into where their best fit is right now. So we'll talk in a little bit about where some of the budget numbers could be applied to do this. I know Mark had put up there the concept plan for the site, and I'll just really briefly touch on that. Obviously, as an 8-9 school, we're not going to need to do as much on the site. What is remaining up there showing for parking would be more than enough to handle even some of the larger events at the facility. Our anticipation is that because of regulations as they are right now, if we do something in terms of changing the site, taking out parking like that, they're going to require us to do stormwater management. The new regulations, and jump in if I'm misstating this, Mark, at all, but the new regulations for stormwater management are quite different than even they were a few years ago. So we're anticipating some of that needing to happen there. The bottom line is you really don't need all that parking at an 8-9 school. You just don't have the student drivers anymore. So still maintaining enough parking to serve large events and whatever else is happening here, but it's not all needed.
Okay, any questions?
No, I mean, it looks like you've done the minimal amount. I mean, this is really, you're not really going overboard here. I mean, you've really tried to keep this to a very
The most intense that we're doing is on the east side there. We're taking out classroom walls and making the bigger classrooms, just because those classrooms are so small, and the configuration is very difficult too.
Do you have any, is there a ballpark for this, or is that shown later?
Cost? Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a bit.
That's next.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Can't talk about concepts without cost, right?
Okay. What about, I see on the agenda here or on the list is the ATS&R recommendations for facility
And they'll
upgrades.
be part of the budget as well, the conceptual budget. The budget that Sam Stotts is going to start right now, I think.
I can start in if that's where the questions are.
Yeah, well, we've got this drawing in front of us now,
Yeah,
buildings.
we'll marry that up with some numbers, I guess, now.
Thank you.
What I'm handing out now is a very similar format that you may recognize from November. What's happened is option 1 has been updated, and obviously since November conversations, additional information has happened. Events and pricing needs to be reflected. So the first thing you'll notice on the very top is the high school. And real quick, I'm just going to go down, and then I'll get into more detail with each one of these. The high school is at the top, the new high school, 3-year school. Next item is that 8-9, and that's where that design that Jody just went over. I'll get into that detail in just a little bit. The orange section is the current middle school. Then there's some additional budgets in the blue, that darker blue, which are going to be some options and different things that we were asked to price out so that they can be discussed as part of this. And then finally in the yellow down at the bottom is the ATS&R. So starting back up at the top, Jody mentioned it briefly there, but the programming that was done actually was reflected here. That was 313,000 square feet. Getting into the more detail with the program, we actually upped that to about 320,000 square feet. So the size of that building increased a little bit. The unit cost also reflect a little bit of an increase as well. What we're seeing right now, we're seeing material costs alone are anywhere from an average 8 to 10% maybe for some certain materials, but really what the impact more so is that the contracting pool is actually getting extremely competitive as far as we're actually experiencing people don't even want to take on work because they're busy, and the contract is actually going to be, we've seen in our school districts in Appleton, we've actually had people turn away work because they said, nah, we're just too busy right now, we don't have that kind of time. And what we're hearing from the economists and the AGC, which is the Associated General Contractors, we're hearing that this is probably going to continue through about 2017. So it's good news for contractors because they're going to be able to stay busy,
Pricing is reflected though in increases, and we're seeing that our prices are going up because of that. So I did adjust that price up slightly to make sure that that was accounted for. What I did is I did do some comparables as well. And just to give you a couple examples, Rivercrest right now, what I'm pricing this as is 2016. I've got to assume pricing for that. Because that's about, by the time design is done and by the time pricing comes through for bidding, I'm assuming 2016, it might be end of 2015, depending on when this referendum passes and then what the pricing or what the schedule would be for bidding. So 2016, Rivercrest would actually be about $205, and that's an elementary at about 90,000 square feet. So the larger the building, you get some economies of scale, but it's a high school, which is going to be a more expensive space typically to build in an elementary. New Richmond would actually be 236, just kind of as a comparable.
New Richmond High School.
New Richmond High School would be 236. So this averages out to about 230, and I felt that that's going to be a reasonable price that we need to hold to at this point.
I have a question.
Yes.
What does that price buy us? It doesn't include competition fields, auditorium, and pool, but does that price include equipment, furnishings, all of that, or is this just the structure?
No, that would have the equipment, and that's about
Computers
typically,
and
yeah, it would be about
classroom desks and all
3%.
of that.
Yeah, typically on a school year about 3% on an FF&E, and that can obviously range. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Sorry.
Thank you.
And that can range, obviously. I mean, people can, no different than if you furnish your house, you can spend a lot more, or you
But
can.
3% is in here.
3% is in
Okay,
there, correct.
thank you.
The next item down is the current high school, and that's the design you just looked at. So right at the top is finishes for
For an
the
8-9.
For the 8-9, correct. Thank you. The finishes upgrade for the school, and what that is that's the entire square footage of that school. And what I did is I applied $8 to $10 a square foot, because you're probably not going to touch the entire school. In talking with Jim Stayskull, we're not going to need to update everything in that school for finishes, but that does need to cover. You'll see down below the next three items actually, where the note on the right says assumes finishes, HVAC, and fire are excluded. It's not really excluded, it's just not within that $40 to $60 or $25 to $40 square foot. So that 8 to 10 would need to be added in those spaces in order to cover for some of the finishes in those spaces. And then in addition, I have 8 to 10 figured in some spaces that you may have ceramic tile that you'd be adding in some place. And obviously all of this needs to be vetted out, and that would happen as part of that design gets moved along. But ceilings, painting, things to give a fresh look into that school was kind of the direction that we were asked to put together some pricing, and that would be what that $2.5 million would reflect. The district office remodeling you can see in there is the $1378, which you can see on your plan. That's exactly what we were estimating. So the square footage is aligned with what you see on those plans, and that's what this estimate is based off of. The site allowance that you see there is at about $2 million, which is pretty pricey, but that's got lighting, that's got the paving being completely removed and then replaced. It's got storm water, pond, it's got landscaping, concrete, curbing. There's quite a bit of work. That's what that site allowance would be for. Any questions? And the fire, actually, I skipped over the fire, I apologize. And we're assuming we would have to install fire suppression system with the amount of remodeling that would be getting done.
Just one other question, the back up to the green section, the 3-year, $73,600,000. Does that include the land? Any
Does
road
not.
improvements?
No, it
That we
does
made?
not.
Nothing.
No,
Okay.
I've got those notes actually down below. I haven't got but that is noted down below.
Okay, thank you.
The enhancements there would also take some of the items from ATS&R off the table, right?
No, actually, I'm getting to that.
Because you've got paving repairs in the east, west, and north.
Yep. I'll actually, if give me 1 minute, I'll be getting down to there. I'll explain how
Sorry.
those priorities. No, that's a good question. The priorities are actually spelled out in conversations that I've had with Jim Stayskull to try to set this up to be a logical way to discuss and make some decisions on what would need to go in where. The next item really isn't a lot to talk about, the middle school. I just want to take note that at this point, we're assuming the middle school is move-in ready, if you will. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't have your typical things that you would be able to do, painting through capital, flooring, things like that if there was things. But for our purposes, we're assuming the middle school is move-in ready. Additional budgets, there's 3 options for an auditorium, 750, 950, and 1100, and you can see essentially that just adjusts by square footage. Those square footages do not have a black box theater included in that. And then there were 2 options for the black box theater. The first one is what we're calling the basic, is actually about 750,000, and that essentially what we're eliminating out of that is getting the space, but excluding the stage rigging, which is, we're estimating around 185, maybe 225,000 for the stage rigging and the lighting in that space.
Which could be added at a later time.
It could be added at a later time very easily, correct. The next item in there were some lockers in the existing school that are very skinny and not very functional. So we were putting that on the list as a potential to include as something that can be replaced. And then the competition fields finally broken out into the football, track, and soccer, and the baseball and softball. Both of those include press box. Football field obviously has the track, it's a natural grass. The goalposts, bathrooms, concessions, scoreboards, and lightings.
Quick question. So is the tennis court and the track then included in the number above?
The tennis court, we would, it actually would be, I would actually include that in the athletic fields down below because we have fields allowances. That's a good question.
Where?
I don't have it listed there, but it's in the 3.2. I should have had the tennis courts listed in there
Tennis
as well.
courts is in the 3.2?
Yes.
Track? 2? Yep.
The
Okay, I
track
see it there.
is-
Sorry. Yep.
yeah,
I
I
missed
apologize,
it
I
the
didn't
first.
have
No,
the tennis
you had it
courts.
there. I didn't see it. It was
The
my
tennis
fault.
courts is the only thing that's not listed here
Not
that's included.
listed,
Yeah, all right.
correct.
But the practice fields are listed up.
We would have, correct, the practice fields, the grading of the site, and that would be included up here. As far as when you start getting competition and those, the paved competition, like the tennis courts would be down below, and the track.
One second, just in the spirit of the working session, would we don't need to talk about now, would we consider doing like naming rights if we did a field?
Certainly the board could do that.
Yeah.
And if-
I just think it's something as a board we should reopen up. I think we really need to think carefully around this. You know, we don't, do naming rights and things like that. I think it's a great way to pay for some of this stuff.
And we could also do it for various things
Yeah.
inside the school as well as, for example, a fab lab, fabrication
Yeah.
lab, something like
So
that.
at a particular time, and I like this to kind of re-bring up some of those things that,
That was a topic we had on facilities and grounds at one time.
Mhm.
So I know
Okay.
Yep.
just something.
certainly be a good topic for them to
I just
discuss
wanna
and
kinda
dive a little
gauge-
bit.
gauge.
But
Okay.
I would support bringing
Yeah.
that up again.
I would as well.
Right? Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
Completely off the topic here, but haven't discussed it.
As long as my name's in the ring, that's fine.
Okay.
Let me see your checkbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Name it Hoffman High School.
We will have you fill out a credit application.
I'd have to talk to some others about that. If there's no questions anymore on that, I'll skip down to the ATS&R piece. And this does get a little bit, I don't want to say complicated, but it really was something to go through with Jim Stayskull was important to me to make sure that I'm not making these recommendations of what priorities are. This is what Jim Stayskull and I walked through. And if you don't remember the report, there's a ton of individual items in here. So I was not going to be the one, since we didn't walk through and put this together, I did not want to be the one that says, here's what priority 1, 2, 3, 4 are. I went through that with Jim in as good a detail as I can, and I'm going to try to explain what our conversation was here. Priority 1, HVAC, all of the items in here that were listed as 2013, so those were in purple under the HVAC, were listed as 2013 items. And a lot of that is fan replacements, some basic things that need to be done. Obviously, it's 1.7 million out of a total, if you remember, was about 14.5 million, I think, was the total for all the HVAC. That's not a big chunk of that, but it is the things that were listed as priority 1 items, or 2013, that needed to be done soon. What I excluded out of that was anything that was talking about removing cooling units in the 1963, because that's not getting replaced yet. So we're not gonna remove that stuff if it's not getting replaced with something new. Where it's getting replaced new is under priority 2. Priority, did you have a question, Bruce?
Well, I'm just curious, we're going through the stuff that we already went through with ATS&R, or are you saying that these numbers are revamped from what was in the ATS&R report?
These have been, I've gone through these and I've actually had conversations with subcontractors as well. I've modified some of these. For instance, the fire protection up top, I'll look at that one. That is not what they had in there. They had a lot more than what I have, and I don't believe that that's going to cost that much, especially if we're going through and removing ceilings as part of some other work. If you were gonna have ceilings as part of the fire protection and just do fire protection, then that would have ratcheted that up about $2 to $3 a square foot for the fire. But since you're going in and removing ceilings already, that's another number that you don't have to have that doubled up, if you will.
Can I just confirm the amount of time that ATS&R had given us to say that these items were gonna be taken? Wasn't it like a pretty lengthy period?
Yeah.
There was
20 years or something.
2018 and 2023 were some of the later items. And those are the 2018 and 2023 fall down the priority list.
Okay.
And actually that is on the right hand in the comments, you can kind of see I tried to spell out, for instance, the very last one, electrical, sound, and lighting includes allowance to address lines 730 to 811 to be included 2023. So I tried to spell out, obviously I can't list, I'm not going to make the whole
Right.
list over again here, but I tried to make sure it was very
What
clear
I-
so you could find them.
It's been a while since I read the report, but what I recall is the HVAC line item was a really big item. It was like
There's a few of
third
them
or a
that-
half of what their total was.
Yep.
And you've got the HVAC broken out over 4 priorities.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Essentially what it breaks down, and I'm gonna just focus on HVAC since it's kind of as you said, it's kind of that big nut in this whole thing.
Right.
You've got HVAC priority 1 items I already explained. Priority 2 essentially adds cooling to the 1963 edition. It's the oldest part, it's the oldest equipment. It's obviously more expensive than the priority 1 items, so we put that to priority 2. Does that mean it's less priority? Not really. It's really the Achilles heel of that building right now is that 1963, the equipment. As Jim put it to me, I'll use the auto analogy, he said, it's like running a 1973 Monte Carlo. I can run it, but it's not efficient and I gotta keep fixing the thing. So, keeping with the car analogy, yes?
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand why we're going through all these details right now, because are we doing it because some of it's gonna be included as part of the referendum? Or is it the question, we're gonna put all of it with the referendum? I mean, these are items that, you know, we've gone through, we've addressed, we're gonna take care of at some point in time, and they're gonna be out there. So I'm just trying to understand why we're covering these in detail right now.
So you're going to have to make decisions as a board, what's going to be in the referendum,
Okay?
and that's the reason.
What's the recommendation, priority through priority what?
I'm gonna I'll finish up with the HVAC, before I lose my train of thought. And Bruce, your comment about this is a lot, I've been going over this for at least 2 months in
Mhm.
detail, and it still is tough to follow, so don't.
And I'm not trying to belittle it at all, or the work that you've done, please don't take that out of context. I just,
Not at all.
some of these things, I just feel like they're a ways out. I don't even know that they're gonna be, maybe they are relevant, but, you know, these all add up. So we need to make sure
Absolutely.
that we're putting the best solution on the table for a referendum pass.
Right.
Mhm.
And to go through all of these and think that we're gonna include all of them now is,
I'll hit the priorities 1 through 3. The 4s really kind of fall, and I'll touch on it real quick, but
Thank
it'll
you.
probably be about another 3-4 minutes, and I'll be done here with that section, just to give the basic information. Priority 2 for the HVAC is essentially, as I mentioned, the cooling of 1963. It's the oldest part. Priority 3 is the 1973, which would convert that system from a steam to the hot water. Those are things, priority 2 and 3. Jim's analogy again with the car was, if I got 4 ball tires, if I only do 2, it's like I'm changing 2 of the ball tires, and that's it. He kind of felt that you can do, and I made sure to understand, yes, you can do that, but that's kind of what that would be an analogy to. So priority 4, there's a significant decrease from what ATS&R had said total for the paving. They had, I believe, estimated 4.3 million, and I apologize, some of these numbers get jumbled in my head.
That sounds right.
You can see between the site allowance I've got up top and this is only about 2.6. The reason why is I think what we can do is we can nail the heavy hitting in the front where the front entrance will be, and then that 625 would be used as needed to fix up the major damages. And again, Jim felt that seems to make sense. It does not need to be a full out replacement in his mind either. So we've reduced that significantly. The rest of these items on here, I'm not going to go through in any more detail. They were the 2018-2023 items that there is actually an established list, and I know Tim and Jim have been going through and trying to knock some of these, and some of these things have actually been knocked off already, to the tune of maybe about 200 and some thousand, I think, to date. I forget the amount again, but it's about that.
Yeah, it's close.
So things are getting knocked off the list. That's pretty much what I wanted to go through with the budget. And is there any other questions on anything?
I have a quick question on the kitchen equipment,
Mhm.
and I don't know that this is the form for it, but I know we have excess in that fund. Can we look at prioritizing that work through paying down that fund?
Yes, we would look at that.
Maybe
Yeah.
finance could address it, or facilities and grounds, or
Yeah,
whatever.
we will absolutely be looking at that as an option.
Okay.
So we do need some direction on the budget, and again, as Bruce pointed out, it is about what's going to be in the referendum question and what you include. When you look at the ATS&R recommendations and think about HVAC, particularly the priority 2 and 3, there's no place in our budget that we are able to address that without a referendum
Yeah, you would,
question.
yeah, you could possibly, if these things are scheduled, if they're being recommended to be scheduled and replaced in 2018, by the time you get everything done, you're looking at, okay, now you need to replace them. You probably have to have another referendum to do that. There wouldn't be another way to fund a $5.5 million replacement out of an operating budget.
How much are we able to spend without referendum on repairs like this?
Well, you have excess levy capacity that doesn't get used. That could be one way, but that would result in a large spike up because if you paid for everything at once, that would result in a large spike up in property tax. That would be one way, but then the other way would have to be bonding.
But I mean, is there a state law or anything that says we could bond for $10 million without going to referendum?
You can
cutoff
bond, there's
figure.
an exemption, but the exemption's only $1 million, and it's $1 million in total. So if right now we have $1 million out already
Okay.
on that.
So you couldn't
The
do
middle
it.
school edition.
Yeah, middle school edition. Thank you. Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to eat into that until that $1 million gets paid down.
Okay, so any of these repairs that ATS&R is recommending, even if we did nothing else, we'd have to referendum for them, correct?
Very, very likely. Yeah, it wouldn't
Okay.
be a
All right.
good way
Or
to
just
pay
budget
for
for
those.
them.
Or it could come out of our allocation for secondary space on our
Fund
fund
balance.
balance.
Yeah, you could do, if you've got a reserve there, so you could tap into some of that. Again, if you look at 5.5 or 6 million, I'm looking at priority 2 and 3, there's not enough there to cover that,
Yeah.
so.
Is there about $3 million or something in that reserve fund?
So I say it's about 3.9.
I think it's,
No,
that was
it's
3.2.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah, we got a lot of numbers.
3.4
Thank
or
you, okay.
3.5.
3.4, 3.5.
Yeah.
So with the net is for us to, that we'd have to go to referendum for, unless we want to do something with just raising taxes all in one time, to do like a bond to pay for this, you have to go to referendum.
Yeah, more than likely, if these numbers hold, you don't have enough in those, in that total to do it.
So if we talked about the green, construct a 3-year high school. The 8-9 building, and then the ATS and our 1 through 3 priority items, where are we at? 100?
What are you including in the options?
I'm not sure. Where are we? If we,
What did you want?
I just want to know if we're talking about this, and this.
Yeah, I'll give you,
What
tell
is
you
it?
what, I just, as we were talking here, I just chose some options.
I think
so
it's
I'm just gonna-
100,
I
and
was
then
gonna throw
plus
them out.
an auditorium or
So,
whatever. Right?
with constructing the 3-year,
I'm confused.
doing the current, all the items under the 8-9 building,
Mhm.
doing a 750, is it a 750
Yep, 750.
auditorium.
How big is your
Doing-
auditorium now?
750.
Currently 750. Doing the competition field, so both football, track, soccer, baseball, softball. And then the ATS in our priorities 1, 2, and 3, I've got 97.4 million.
And that doesn't include land or road
That does not
improvements.
include land or land improvements.
And land at the 60,000, if we are 65 acres, is what, 3.9? Something like that? Sorry.
Well, if you just took, for now, St. Croix Meadows, and the price on that,
4 or something.
Where if we look
Is it
at
4.6?
improvements,
Oh,
but,
okay.
well, improvements
Okay.
and everything would drive it over, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.5, somewhere in there.
Okay, but when you added those extras, that was to get to that 100 number or whatever, the 97.5 you said. That was including the extras in the total.
Yeah.
But we don't have to do that on a referendum. You can have multiple
We don't,
questions,
right,
right?
yeah, like I said, I just sat here as
I
we were
just
going through
was trying
this,
to get
and
a-
put them down and just said, for sake of argument, what does that look like? So,
If
yeah,
it
you
all
don't,
passed, this is what it would be, right?
yeah, you know, certainly competition fields could come later. You know, it's-
But like, I'm looking, just for, as an example, on an auditorium, I mean, I would think that that would be a separate item question on the referendum. But I don't know that, why would we go with the cheapest, which is exactly what we already have, is
And it's not
700.
I
adequate.
wouldn't,
And it's
no.
not adequate. But
Just-
for an extra 800,000, or 710,000, we would add 33% capacity.
so we'd like to give you some information on the auditorium, because the last time we talked about it, you wanted to know what other high schools had in their seating capacity. So Tracy's done that.
So River Falls High School, 750, Richmond, 800, Stillwater, 500. East Ridge High School, 952, Wausau East, 878. Bloomington High School, both Jefferson and Kennedy, which are big schools, those were both 929, 961. So there's really,
Wow.
there are not schools building with those higher, that 1,000 for sure. Other than, the only school I could find is Eau Claire.
So I
But
go
I
to.
think that's a little bit different situation.
But Eau Claire, what does that mean? What do they have?
They're 14.
1,400.
But I did not check to see what their connection is with,
University.
University.
right.
So the auditorium serves as part of our program. And certainly it could be a separate question, but it also could be part of the total package as well. And if we look at the survey results, Tracy, can you speak to that as far as the auditorium?
Well, the auditorium came back as one of the highest supported items.
And wasn't it the highest of the kind of things like fields and? it was
I'm not
the
even sure it's a
number
good
one.
strategy to keep it out. I think you just, you know, people are not gonna vote or not vote because on $100 million referendum, it's, you know, 99 million. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we think it's the right thing for the program, I think just
So
be part of
it's
it.
either 6.2 or it's 6.9 if you go with either of the two smaller sides.
With a potential referendum, if what you're talking about with corporate sponsorship or whatever, would that be something that would need to be included as possible numbers that,
You mean before the referendum?
yes, or include that if it's going to be looked at
I
again?
think it's up to a certain amount, so I think if we were to say, here's what it's up to, if we ever get some sponsorship and take that down, I think that's,
But put it out there that as a possibility?
I don't know if
if
we have to
it's-
put it in the referendum.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't be able to put it in the language. The language is very cut and dried, very
Yeah.
legal.
And it would be very difficult for us to do that in
Right.
time for a
Yeah.
referendum as well. So you'd be also looking at some, say, enhancements. Maybe the board decides not to do one of the competition fields. Or maybe I look at the competition field that's football, track, and soccer, using the same turf. Because of the damage to the turf, if it's grass, that's a problem. And so it could be a sponsor or somebody who pays for artificial turf instead. And then we would be able to use it for all of those sports. Different than what you can do with grass.
Yeah, again, I don't know if we want to get into this level of detail, but my general feeling for this, if we're going to have a large referendum to build this school, we should have, we shouldn't shortchange ourselves and say we'll do it later, because if the amount of energy to do it later would be, I think would be much more efficient to say, if we think it should have a competition field for baseball and football, and it should have a 9, we should just put it in the referendum. 'Cause I
It
don't
certainly
think,
seemed that the community sense is
Right.
for a total package.
'cause I don't think, again, I don't think the referendum would pass or not pass because it's, there's one less competitive competition field. So I think you're better off just putting in what the community's asked for, and I think would gather more support for the referendum. If people are not going to vote against the referendum, we're going to vote against it regardless if you have a field in it or not a field. So, but again, I'm not sure, for tonight, I'm not sure we're going to get to that level of detail, but just do it. Since it's a working session.
Any direction you can give us on this budget is helpful.
Yeah.
So if you can look at ATS&R and you can say we want to cut it here, we're really not recommending priority 4.
Right.
Yeah, I would seem to me that we do priority 1 through 3. If we have a HVAC system that's, looks like it's 1973.
6
It's
degrees, some of
63
it.
and 70.
Yeah, yeah. So to me, it seems to make sense. I didn't go through each of the priority 4s, but it seems to me those are things that we could fund out of another source as they come up. And then since I have the floor here, then I would say it's probably 950 seat auditorium, the 2 competitive fields, and that would be my recommendation.
Can I ask a question? Around the referendum, the conversation that took place previously was this $40 million that's coming off for debt service, right?
Mhm.
So the referendum is for that number regardless of any debt service, the cap or availability we have?
Right, it's for the total number.
Because
And then
the-
it's how it affects the property tax.
Well, but the referendum is written for the bonding that will be done. So it will include subtraction of some of that
It will.
debt. Yeah, because it's written for the bonding that's done.
It's good to know.
What does that mean, like, Tim, again?
I
So,
don't understand
okay.
it to be that way before.
Yeah, well, so for example, when we went and when we did Rivercrest, you come out and you write the language. You had dollars in reserves. The reserves come off the top, even though the construction project was 15.5. We bonded for less than that. But the language is written that the voters are approving bonding for up to a certain amount of dollars.
So it doesn't include the 3 million that we had that we put into it.
Right, yeah.
But,
Okay.
it- but,
It's new information.
but.
I think
it
I
doesn't.
got that right. I think I got that
I
right.
think he
I
answered
think-
a different question than what you
Yeah.
asked.
I mean, he's getting at the same point, because I want to get to a point where you can come up with a calculation in terms of what the impact is going to be to an
The
individual.
taxpayer,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we'll.
So I'm just trying to get there, right? So I understand that the referendum is what it is, but then how are we going to get at this calculation to present some options?
Yeah.
So your
And it-
question is let's just say this is 102 million or whatever, I don't remember, whatever, 97
Let's use it
million.
for 100 for round number.
Yeah, so if we were deciding that's what we wanted to fund and go to the taxpayer to ask for, what would we be asking them for?
For $100
Net,
million
net,
referendum.
net.
Yeah, you're gonna ask them for
100 million.
net, for the net
60.
amount. So, yeah, so let's say in this
No.
case, it's a
No.
clean
No,
drop.
that can't be right. You can't just, the existing bond, 40 million that you're gonna be paying off, isn't a revolving line of credit. You can't just go back and reuse
What
it.
I'm saying, I'm not saying the whole 40 is gonna come off, but there is debt service that drops off. That is not, it is not being refinanced. Okay, it drops off.
And I believe that whole bond thing that you're talking about isn't done until 2018 or something like that.
I might, you know what, folks,
2019.
I'm gonna back up.
Yeah.
I might be wrong. I do wanna go back and check this, exactly how that language would read. So I don't wanna lead us down the wrong
Okay.
path.
See, it's two different things,
Right.
Bruce. You know, you have to bond, let's say it's gonna cost 100 million. That's what your referendum has
Yeah.
to say. You have to tell people
But
this is what we're
the
gonna
net
spend.
impact to
Understand.
taxpayers.
The
we
net
talk
impact
about
to the
the net
taxpayer
impact.
is a separate deal completely. And
Yeah.
as the bonds get paid off, that are gonna get paid off,
Yep.
Then we levy for
that
less debt
changes.
service.
Yeah.
You levy for less each year as the bonds get
Right.
paid off.
So again, this is taking away the smoke and mirrors and the shiny object and the number down here, right? It's just to make sure that we get to the number and everything that's accurate, so.
Yeah, and it's gonna be hard to come up with an actual accurate number for the taxpayer to look at this and say, okay, my house is worth $200,000, they're gonna borrow 100 million, and this is what it's gonna cost me. Because if this project goes forward before our existing 40 million in bonds get paid off, we're gonna be doing 100 million bonding, and we're gonna still have the 40 million, which will be dropping off in increments. So each year, they drop off a little bit, but the whole 40 million
Yeah,
doesn't
but you
drop off at
can,
one
you
time.
can model there's ways to
Just
model
model
the
it.
bonding, so.
For your bonding,
yeah,
so that,
Yeah, you can
okay,
extend
some are going and some are
that,
coming.
right, yeah.
So,
You can-
Tim's gonna bring some more information back to the July 8th board meeting
Okay.
in relationship to that, as far as he can go. I don't know if he can get
I think it's
to
good
that
things to
level
document.
yet.
Let's just
but we
document
will.
those, things that we need. The idea, I think, tonight is to figure out, like.
What that looks like.
What does it look like?
Net.
What would the, based on
What's the
100
timing,
million.
what does the net look like
Right.
to the taxpayer?
Yeah,
Because that's really what we're
Yeah.
gonna have to speak to.
yeah.
That's what they wanna know.
And and then you can use a couple models on $175,000 house or $150,000 house. Here's the, based on today's mill rate and valuation, here's what the impact would be. Right.
And that's what we did for Rivercrest.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so getting back to the top section, the green, which has got the least amount of detail, and you had some explanation of why the number went up, but I just want to be real clear about it, because our number before was less than 63, right?
I believe I think it was 63, or maybe just a shade, yeah, it was around 63 million, correct.
But, and part of that was, I understand you said you increased the square footage by
And material costs.
2.5%, okay? That's 2.5%, but the range on the per square foot cost is what the big change
The
was.
material costs went up.
190 and the
It-
lower, or-
It averaged it was 313,500 square feet. The range was 165 to 225, so that averages out to about 195, if I remember right. If my math is correct there. And now, we're at about 320,000 square feet at about 230. It is a sizable jump, roughly.
And other than the lack of competition and people not wanting to do this work anymore because they got enough of other work, what's the explanation? Is there material costs that have gone up?
Yeah, you just-
It's material cost, but I want to clarify, it's not that they don't want to do the work. It's, there's enough work going around that contractors are pricing differently now. I don't want to say they were doing it at a loss, but they were certainly doing things more at cost to keep things busy and
They were
things were
hungry.
tight. They were hungry. Now there's a lot of work going around, and what we're seeing, even in the last 6 months of this year, what we've seen in the referendums for school districts that we've worked with, Appleton schools, Berlin schools, pricing is not what it was, and it's definitely on the increase. And the forecasting, I'm not an economist, so looking at what they are saying, AGC economists are saying that this is probably going to continue through 2017. And when they say it, it's great news, because we're in the construction industry and people are saying, hey, things are going to keep going, there's work out there. But what it means is prices won't probably see a dip.
And material
I can't-
cost is up. Right.
Material cost is up. Some have stayed flat, some have gone up, but on average, material cost is probably 8 to 10%.
And you're basing this on a forecast of in 2016,
I
right?
am. I have to make sure that this is priced for when this would actually bid. I can't put forth, and that's why I say before I put Rivercrest was about 205. If you remember, that actually is about 29% less than the conventional and other schools in the area at the time. If you take Rivercrest and I would put that a factor, that 29% on, that would actually be about $265 a square foot in 2016. So it's not unreasonable
This is
to
lead
say-
what? Is this lead silver or what?
We would assume that this would be able to get lead silver. We would, if Hoffman was doing this, we would assume lead gold. We try to typically go to lead gold without having an increase. Lead platinum sometimes is tough without having some additional amenities that you would need to have to get the lead platinum. Not that it's impossible, but we've done that as well.
Thanks.
Do you want to explain what lead, silver, gold, and platinum is for her?
Actually, can't get to that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't want to give a definition, but I'm familiar with it.
I'm
Didn't
not
know if
really
you had
happy to
heard it
give a
before.
definition either because it's not easy.
The real question is can you re-explain it? No.
Okay.
Is that still the relevant kind of certification for
It's still
building
very popular.
environmentally sound?
Yep, it's still very popular and in use in a lot of buildings.
And we are benefiting from it, continue to benefit from it at Rivercrest because our operational costs are reduced as a result every year.
Has there been has anyone done any studies, either you, Hoffman, or our staff, about what this building is gonna cost once it's up?
Yes.
In overhead, operational costs, that type of thing?
We did that for Rivercrest, but we do that at a later date.
At a
We-
later
We've
date.
got to get
Okay, and
some
does the
decisions
staffing
made
come
here
in at a
first.
later date too then, to figure out how many additional people you're gonna have to be in the building?
We added that in as well, in relationship to
Maybe
the
operating costs.
administrative.
Right, yeah, there'd be some.
At what point do we get that figure?
That's going to be after some decisions are made by the board about the referendum.
Okay, but we get that information prior to the referendum, so we know what,
Oh, for
Oh,
sure.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
We'll need that when we're
Yes,
talking.
yes.
Well, prior, yeah.
all right, just asking,
But it's usually after the board's made a decision about the referendum that we get to that.
okay.
All right, so have we gone through the list of this facility considerations and phasing plan for construction?
Phasing plan I haven't touched on yet, but I do have.
So is there any other feedback for us? What about the priorities for ATSNR? What do you
Yeah,
think
so I'd
about
weigh in
that?
on that. Would that be helpful
did.
for us to weigh in on that?
Yes, it would be.
I would want to do 1, 2, and 3 as part of moving forward to a referendum. My only concern about what we didn't touch in number 4 is
Roof
roof repairs. That's a concern for me. I don't want to have roofing issues that aren't
Yeah.
dealt with because you have further damage, potentially, mold
That's
issues
one
and
I
other
looked at,
issues
too.
as we. So I don't really know if they were factoring in, the age of the roof is 10 years. You have, 5 more years of usable. I'm not, maybe you can speak to what the roof
Say on the
issues
roads,
were.
2023.
Yeah, let me just find the
That's
roof real quick.
Probably for, I assume that it wasn't.
I'm good, but I don't
Right,
have
yeah.
that good of a memory, so give me
Yeah.
1 second.
Thank
I
you.
do know where to find it, that's where my memory stops.
Sure, yeah. We, on an annual basis, we spend somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 to do roof replacements. So it's on a cycle, but I want Sam to look up. the
I know Jim
information.
always talks about that and
Yeah, each year we're doing that.
They had that 2018. Is when they had targeted, so it was a 5 years out, if you will, from when this was done.
Probably should.
And it does not say the location of the roof here.
Well, didn't they want to do I don't know the name of this, a thermo something of the roofs first?
Yeah, thermographic analysis of all roofs.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were on track to do that, but the contractor that we had lined up just pulled out due to all the storms and tornadoes in their area. They've been inundated.
You've had rain
so-
Just a little.
Just a little?
We're creating new
So are we-
wetlands as we speak.
So do we want to move the roof to the priority 3?
I just wanted to bring that up. I think we should know more details about it, or,
I think for purposes of this, since it's 2018 roofing, it probably should be.
Yeah.
So that's the 1.5, 1.75?
1.575.
Okay, yeah. How about other people? So Brian and Lynn have weighed in.
Anyone else?
No, I think that we should move the roof up. I'm actually in, I think that the repairs that ATS&R came up with, when you've got them categorized here, should be done because we have to keep the building in good shape. I'm not in favor of the build project. I'm not, we're gonna spend $100 million. I know you're talking 40, 50 years out. But right now, we have about 100 extra students in the high school, maybe 150 in the middle school. So we're gonna spend $100 million to figure out a problem for 250 students seems like an awful lot of money to me. And I have great concern that we'll never get a referendum passed anywhere near that figure. So I'm not in favor of all that, but I really think that the ATS&R stuff needs to be done. And the priority, we've done a great job of laying this out like this. I know it had to be a lot of work because that report was, so I appreciate this. And I think they should be done.
I think Jim was saying too.
Yeah, he's great.
Bruce and Carrie,
He
on the
knows what he's
roof,
doing.
would you move it up to priority 3 or?
I would prefer Jim's opinion, but if Jim feels that it's something that needs to be moved up, I would support it.
Mhm.
All right, well, I found Jim knows a lot about it, and I would defer to him as well.
He does, he's good.
What about the additional stuff? Because we've said we would pick, one person said they picked the 950 auditorium. Anyone else want to weigh in on that as far as an auditorium?
well, to me, it doesn't make sense to build something that we already have. And, you think back to the survey, and, Tracy reiterated tonight that it was a high priority in the community survey. So for those reasons, I would, but I guess I pictured it being a separate line item on the referendum.
Okay, well, that part we can discuss
Yeah,
later,
yeah.
but still putting it, knowing which one we should be focusing on.
I don't see rebuilding something we already have as an asset currently. So
Correct.
we're either trying to add more capacity where we can accommodate some of the venues that we don't feel like we're currently accommodating.
Right.
Or I think we
And
keep
I
going
think
with that.
11 is too much.
Okay,
So as a line item for me, I would say it should be better as a line item as opposed to just including it in there. And the 950 is the line item.
So auditoriums are being built generally a little smaller than they have been in the past. And the difference in this school is that we don't have at the high school is we don't have a large gym, like a 4-station gym, that other venues, events can be held in. So our auditorium takes some of those events. I just want you to consider the size of our community, thinking now we're going to have, 1,500 seats in an auditorium, in 2 auditoriums, and how much we can actually use them. Or I only did 750, it could be bigger. So it's just, that's a lot for the size of our community that we need to think about as well. It works well for the school if it's bigger, because the class sizes, right now we graduated 417 students. So it is very difficult for our events to be at 750, but it's also a lot of seats for our community, the size of our community.
well, one option, I'm not saying that this is the end-all be-all, but would be to, if it's a separate item, say spend up to $6.9 million for an auditorium, and if in the end, once we get to the building decisions and so forth, and we decide that we don't want 950 seats, we take something less. I mean, I'm just looking at the extra capacity, extra 200 seats for $700,000. Again, that's I don't know, not math real fast, but that's about 30% increase in capacity for the 700,000. Now, in the end, if we say we're not gonna use, we're never gonna need 950, but maybe 750 or 800 makes sense, then we just don't spend that extra money. We spend something else.
So what if we, trying to move us forward, I didn't hear anybody, I don't think, who supported the 1100.
Right.
So what if we just take that off the list?
Mhm.
And we can either leave the 950 as is, or leave 750 and 950 at the present time? Just trying to reduce the list.
Okay. What about the black box?
But is that okay doing, how would you like to see that, both? Or go to the 950 and leave the 950? Whether it's a separate question or not.
I think
that can
really
be
both
said.
for now. I mean, we can always
Yeah.
take it off later, but it sounds like, you know, I'd maybe like to have.
Understanding it's an either or, it's not that we're adding both numbers together.
Correct.
But I was gonna move on to the black box, but I didn't hear that as far as when Brian was running down this list of things to be included, so.
When we talked about the black box before, we talked about it as really integral to a theater program. And certainly our community supports the arts, and it could be built as the basic and added on. We talked about if we had that, a black box in an auditorium, we have the flexibility there to have different venues and to, Tracy, I know you talked about this, so I'm trying to think of what the advantage to have both of them. There were different venues that we would use
There's
them.
just different kinds of, they serve different performances, different kinds of activities.
But our staff would also use it for classes
You
and
could
so
use it
forth.
as your space for small group meeting space as well.
So there are multiple things we can do
Just
in
like,
that
just kind of a
space.
point of order, I just think it's kind of a tactical item right now, like, whether we have black box or not black, it just seems like it's really the right time to be. It's part of the curriculum, I mean, I don't know, you have shops and stuff like that, if it's part of the curriculum, then it's part of the curriculum. I'm not sure ways of boarding it way in, if we have 4 mechanical shops or 2, or at this particular juncture. It's part of the curriculum, then it should be part of the school.
Well, if we were moving forward to.
My point is, I don't, like, you could have like a list of like 100 things here, like how many, how big of a cafeteria do you want? Do you want 4 shop labs or 3? I mean, I don't know, right?
Well, at some point, we have to have some of those decisions just to get to a dollar amount.
I know,
So
my
that's why
point
we're
is,
trying
you
to
think it's
move
part of the
forward.
curriculum, then just do it. Add it in.
Can you have that as a line item too?
Just leave it in for now as a line? Is that what you're saying, or?
Well, I'm just saying, it's, we're putting the auditorium as a line item, right? That's been the discussion. Would the
Just-
black box be a potential
You mean
line item?
like a separate
Separate
item on the
question.
referendum? I don't know that that's.
We're not making that
That hasn't
decision
been
right now.
decided.
We're just trying to.
But do you want to keep it on the list to move forward, I think is the question, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We're trying to reduce this list.
I would support moving it forward for the purposes of discussion. I don't want
When
it
you
to
say
get lost
it-
or forgotten.
I guess my point is, we've got 2. We've got a premium, we've got a basic. Are we moving forward one or the other, or just move everything forward? I mean, and not eliminate anything, and then we'll rehash this again later down the road. Should we make a decision or not? Or just keep kicking it down, kick the can down the road?
Okay, again, I'll just say that I'm not sure what we're talking about. If it's part of the curriculum, you should have it in the school.
So your answer is yes.
Yeah, and let the administration figure out what they want to do. I'm not going to ask them what kind of labs they're going to build either, right? So if it's I'm not sure why we, the board, are even talking about it. But I would say, Jamie, to answer your question, we do the basic.
Okay?
Until someone.
Anyone else? Strong feelings on it? Then-
No.
All right.
I
I'm
do
not
agree with
seeing
the
any.
950 seat auditorium.
Okay. We've got feedback on the auditorium, black box. and
Fields for me, yes.
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 Brian, I think was already a
Yep,
yes on the fields.
I'm good on those.
All right. Sandy? All right.
Jamie? What's your opinion?
Well, I think that we have, whether it's gonna be a separate question on the referendum is something we decide later. So
Right.
I think it should move forward at least for now.
Okay. So right now, what we have, we'll consolidate this list. We have for further consideration, the 750 seat auditorium, the 950 seat auditorium, the black box basic, The lockers,
Lockers are a yes for me. I included that in.
I'm assuming we just need to do that.
Right. Lockers
and
don't
the-
work, we need them to work.
And the two competition fields.
Yes, for me.
And then the priority 1, 2, and 3, and we'll check with Jim on roof repairs.
Correct.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. So we'll move on to, this is the timeline?
This is, and this won't take long to discuss because it's in basic concept. Obviously, Brian, you're mentioning about the detail. This is the highest level of scheduling that you'll see. This is not detailed. This is, basic concept is we would design the high school, build the high school, and then you would move the students out of the existing high school before you'd renovate the existing high school. You could flip-flop it, but you're gonna add cost, it's gonna add time if you're trying to remodel around a school in full use. By waiting, obviously that pushes that out to 2018, but it's also gonna reduce the cost down because you're gonna be able to basically isolate half of that school before you move the middle school over, the 8 portion over into it. You would just leave 9 in the existing high school. And some of these things, I'm gonna say, these are all up for debate as we get further into design, obviously. But the basic concept is design, build a new high school, then renovate the existing high school so you have space to move the students within it. And really, it's for the safety of the children. We want to try to make sure that we're not working and creating spaces that you can't learn in either. So by waiting, you can really separate those spaces a lot easier. You can get done quicker. You can that drives down the cost and drives down the amount of time that we're actually in there doing that. So that's essentially what you're looking at. It does have the design timelines in there as well. I did want to point out just real quick that new high school, I added a time in there for an early site package. We would anticipate that would be something you would really want to try to look at so that you can continue the design, but once you get a footprint and you start going through, obviously with the size of this building, that design and putting those construction documents takes a good amount of time. So we would say we would try to do some sort of a site package early so that you can get a jump on this and get things moving quicker. And this is based off of a November referendum at this time.
I have a question.
Yes.
That early site package says the start is March 25th of 2014. Has that already been started?
Oh, that's, yeah, I'm sorry. That's more, that needs to shift. That's actually going to be after, well, technically, I guess you saw a site up there. So that's not the site
Says
though.
it's going to be finished on March 25th,
Yeah,
2014.
that is actually, I gotta think of the logic. Hold on a second, I've got my
That's
schedule.
what I was gonna ask you, on your overall timeline, it says 1,234 days, and it starts on March 25th. So,
That was the start that I just had in there. That's actually, let me, I'll pull my schedule up right here.
I mean, by pushing it back now that we're past June 25th, doesn't necessarily add,
No, because
90 days at the back.
the target date, the milestone date, is actually that November 4th. That's where all the logic starts coming from.
okay?
With the exception, you'll see there is no number there actually. The predecessor underneath the early site, that one I need to move down. That would actually go right after, it'd actually be June of 15.
What-
Because it would be after
what-
design development.
What's June of 15, the one I'm questioning?
early site one.
Yeah, the early
Yeah.
site bid package.
So should we say 7/1/15? Is that,
Yes. No, I'm sorry, it would be June 15th,
Of 15.
because it would be after the design development.
so before construction documents, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions on the timeline and phase-in of the construction? Does that make sense to people about building the new building and then remodeling?
Is this like a conservative? Do you feel like there's opportunities to improve upon this? Or is this, based upon your experience, pretty solid?
It's realistic. I wouldn't say it's conservative, it's either to the one way or the other. I think it's realistic.
Okay.
Yeah,
Even on the renovation side?
the renovation side as well, just because of the renovations get a little complicated when you do have existing spaces we're moving. If we could have the whole building at one time, but I didn't think that that was gonna be an option, because there's really no logical place. Obviously, you've got an entire class that you would need to displace somewhere.
You can't get that done over the summer?
That's,
Jim Stayskull could.
that's a lot, honestly, there's, you know, Bruce, in all fairness, it depends on what goes under the ATS&R. If it's a full heating replacement, no. If it's just the renovations and room remodeling, then yeah, that's possible to put that into a summer. It's a lot, but it's possible to start talking about that. We're doing, right now, a high school administration remodel for the Berlin School District, and I think that's about 20,000 or 15,000 square feet, and I don't, again, numbers sometimes, but it was a sizable renovation that's happening over the summer. So you just size up the crews accordingly, and you'd have maybe 2 crews in 2 different spots trying to get that stuff accomplished. But if you do all the heating replacement and everything, that's where, there's no way. That's too much here, because you do have to go through the entire school then.
Okay, thank you.
So that 420 days in construction is pretty solid.
Yeah, that's based off of what we've had, Northland Pines was how big? Northland Pines was 250,000, and that was about 15 to 16 months. And this is why I'm saying an early site package would really help us to try to create a little extra time in there so that we're not pinching that. And that's where, depending on when this goes and when we can get the designs completed, because you really want to try to maximize when you put it out to bid too, and try to get an opportune time so that you can get good bid numbers as well. So that's why I'm saying some of this stuff is still subject to a strategy, if you will, of making sure that you hit the times right.
All right, thank you.
But the punch list, finishing the punch list and the move-in times of roughly 1 month for each. Is that historically for a school, a size of this, the 320,000 square foot is?
Yeah, and that can happen. Again, it's a coordinated effort. It's a lot of work going on, but there's, it looks like a bee's hive when those things are happening. There's a lot of things going on. It's just a coordinated effort, but yeah, that's realistic.
Okay. Anyone else have questions on this part?
I don't.
All right. And we're down to other considerations then? Well, we're still off of Robert's rules.
Well, anything that you want us to bring back to you that would help in your decision-making, we should identify that now. And then any other guidance for us before we move on to the closed session.
Well, I suppose the big one is the, again, the green section at the top. That number's going to fluctuate depending on the site, right? And we have to, that's what we have to work on between now and whenever we make some more decisions on this, right?
But just to clarify, that number doesn't include the site.
I understand that.
Okay,
That's what I
that's what
mean,
he's
is that
saying.
with the
Right.
site, that number's going to change, and fitting the structure on the site is going to depend on how much infrastructure we need. So,
Now we gotta figure out where we're gonna build this thing.
yeah.
That would be a good thing.
That's the
Okay.
priority that they're
And then we figure out, how we're gonna engage the, the community in this process. Those are the 2 things I have,
But programmatically, I think we're on track then with how we're converting the
Yeah,
high school.
it's good. Good to see it all laid out.
All right.
Okay.
I have just a question. I've been asked by someone if they can come and do a little presentation to the school board on birth rates and stuff. Is that something I need to ask you about after? It's not on this agenda, so is it something that cannot be talked about here, or do I need to ask you? I know I need to do it in writing. Request something, get on an agenda, it has to be done in writing 3 or 5 days up before the meeting or something like that, and there are new rules. I need to know if I need to do it outside of this meeting, or if I can do it now.
It's not on the agenda. so-
Okay, all right, then after this meeting is over, I'll get with you.
Thank you.
All right.
Anybody else have any other considerations on this advancement of the secondary space solution? All right.
No, sir.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to return to Robert's rules.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Bruce, second by Brian. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Now I will entertain a motion using the language provided regarding the to closed session.
Motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent E, to deliberate for negotiation, the purchase or sale of property.
Second.
Second by Lynn. All those in favor? Well, I guess we start with Sandy.
Griffey, aye.
Robson, aye.
Well,
Johnson, aye.
Hanson, aye?
Whitaker.